You've probably spent a few evenings scrolling through endless specs sheets, wondering if any of those numbers actually translate into a UPS that will sit quietly in your server closet, keep your workstation alive during the next brownout, and let you grab a coffee without fretting over a blinking red light. The fear is real. Spend a good chunk of money on a unit that looks impressive on paper, only to discover it takes up more space than you have, shuts down at the first surge, or forces you to fumble with confusing menus when the power finally decides to flicker. That's why I'm going to walk you through the APC Smart UPS X3000 VA, not by rattling off its wattage or battery count, but by looking at the day-to-day realities you'll face if you decide to bring it home. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the kind of person who truly benefits from a 3000 VA, 200240V UPS is someone who runs critical equipment that can't afford an abrupt shutdown. Think a small office server, a network-attached storage device, or a workstation that houses expensive CAD software and a mountain of unsaved files. If you're a gamer with a single PC, a home office with a basic laptop, or a hobbyist who only needs to protect a router for a few minutes, you'll likely be overpaying for capacity you'll never tap. On the flip side, anyone who has already been burned by cheap, low-capacity units that die the moment a UPS alarm sounds will find the Smart UPS X a welcome upgrade if the trade-offs line up with their environment. One of the biggest practical strengths of the Smart UPS X is its smart interface. The LCD screen is not just a sea of numbers, it actually guides you through the initial configuration with clear prompts. When you power it up for the first time, the unit walks you step by step to set the input voltage range, the desired battery runtime, and the shutdown delay for connected devices. This means you don't have to be an electrician to avoid the dreaded battery overdraw error that forces a hard reset. In a real-world scenario, I set up a test rig with a 90-minute runtime target on a modest 2 kilowatts load, and the unit calculated the required battery charge without me needing a spreadsheet. It saved me time, and more importantly, it prevented a misconfiguration that could have left my server offline during a simulated outage. Space is another factor that tends to get overlooked until you actually open the rack. The APC Smart UPS X comes in both rack mount and tower configurations, but the dimensions are still larger than you might expect for a 3000 VA machine. In a 42U rack, the unit occupies 3 slots, which is fine if you have a dedicated space for power management. However, if your rack is already tight, you may have to sacrifice a slot that could otherwise hold networking gear. For a tower setup, the footprint sits roughly on a small side table, and you'll need a stable, ventilated surface. The unit's fan can get surprisingly loud when the internal temperature rises during a prolonged outage. I placed it next to a standard office desk, and after an hour of high load, the fan hit a whine that was audible across the room. If you value a whisper-quiet office, that's a point to consider. Battery life and replacement cycles are often hidden costs that people forget until the warranty expires. APC advertises a typical 5-year lifespan for the battery pack, but it's worth noting that the battery is not hot-swappable. To replace it, you'll have to power down the unit, disconnect your equipment, and physically open the UPS. For a data center administrator who can schedule a maintenance window, this is manageable. For a small business owner who runs the equipment themselves, it may feel like a chore. On the bright side, the Smart UPS X includes a battery health indicator on the LCD that alerts you well before the capacity drops below usable levels, giving you a heads-up to order a replacement before a sudden failure occurs. Connectivity options are a subtle but invaluable strength. The unit features both USB and Ethernet ports, allowing you to manage it remotely via APC's PowerShoot software. In practice, this means you can set up email alerts for undervoltage events, schedule graceful shutdowns for nights when you plan to run compute-intensive batch jobs, and even integrate the UPS into a SNM-based monitoring system. I linked the UPS to my home lab's monitoring dashboard, and the moment the power flickered during a test, the dashboard flagged the event, and PowerShoot initiated an orderly shutdown of the Proxmox host. Without those remote capabilities, you'd be stuck watching the front panel manually, a risky proposition if the outage lasts longer than the battery can sustain. Now let's address the less obvious weaknesses. The Smart UPS-X, unlike some lower-end models, does not have an automatic voltage regulation (AVR) feature that can smooth out minor sags and spikes without dipping into battery power. If your area suffers frequent minor brownouts, the UPS will draw on the battery more often, shaving off the overall runtime you expected. In a testing scenario,